Hi everybody, welcome to scenario 3, SLAB SAVERS scenario 3, and today we're going to look at a commercial building, and some of the things that we look at as far as commercial buildings is remembering that, that you're comparing apples to oranges. Your residential fires, when you look at the slab, are going to have certain safety, life, air track, and building components versus a commercial fire. When you look at the safety profile of a commercial fire versus a residential, there's a lot more problems as far as hazardous materials, gaining access, reinforced doors, including stuff that you may be using Knox keys or getting inside that commercial building. But there's a lot more opportunities to have that safety profile problem. Your life profile, on the other hand, is actually a lot of times in the reverse. There's plenty of alarms, sprinklers, exits for those occupants to get out of. And for the most part, when you deal with that residential side, they're trying to save their property, trying to save their cat. Whereas if a fire in a commercial building is going on, it's not their stuff. They're more apt to leave the structure, and it's also possibly insured. So they're going to be exiting the structure, not trying to maintain and save lives and property on their own. So that's going to change your life profile. The air track on these as well, you're talking about more square footage. Cubic feet is going to be a big deal when you start talking about ceiling heights and how fast or slow that changes your fire behavior, including flashover, fire spread, as well as the amount of material is going to affect your air track. And a lot of times with your air track on these commercial buildings, there may or may not be exits or windows in a large structure. So your air track is going to be a big component of this, and then the building. And your commercial structures can be made of all types of materials. Most of the time in your residential, you're either talking lightweight or conventional, and with commercial occupancies, it can be everything ranging from pre-33, you can talk about masonry, you can talk about block, you can talk about wood, heavy timber. So there's a lot of different opportunities in your building profile to discuss what's actually going on. So with your slab component of the commercial occupancy, the other big reason why you should be doing a slab on there is we talk about your risk versus gain assessment. In a residential fire, if you look at the number of residential fires we go to every year in the United States, there's a lot more residential fires than there are commercial fires. However, every year when we talk about over a decade, how many firefighters are lost in the line of duty on residential houses versus commercial occupancies, it's about the same on average. And the hard part about that is it's because on these commercial fires, we're fighting them like residential fires. And also the number of commercial fires is a lot less, so it's that low frequency, higher risk, and unfortunately when we talk about commercial fires in that regard and line of duty deaths, most of the time we're killing them in multiples, killing our firefighters in multiples. 6, 9, like in Charleston. So you definitely have to make sure you're doing a good slab profile on your commercial structures. So when we actually take a look at this, this scenario that we're doing for scenario 3, there's a couple things that come into play when you start talking about the slab. When we talk about safety profile, you're looking at, it's a big box building. It looks like there's possibly a warehouse. It's multiple subdivisions. So you got a step up that goes into the warehouse, and then you got a Division 1 and Division 2. So that's going to come into play with your building profile. Other safety aspects I look at is that there's bars on the windows. This is some reinforced rebar up on the second floor, and the windows on the first floor are not going to be big enough for an occupant or a firefighter to escape from. So for the most part, this whole front of the building and this administrative portion, if that's what it is, your access and egress is going to be fairly limited. Your life profile on this, again, most of the time your occupants are going to be out. But another thing to actually key into is you'll notice that it's got this for lease sign up here, and it's actually all the way around. There's for lease signs all the way around in the building here. So you want to take that into consideration. Is it occupied? Is it not? If you respond to this at 2 o'clock in the morning and you had to force entry to get inside the structure, then you probably don't have that life profile component either. Your air track, based on this, looks like you got an established fire. Your volume, velocity, density, color, a little bit pressurized, but the color's gray. And that's a huge thing to look at, because when you start having this gray smoke versus this black smoke, this could actually be just that smoke travel that's going on. because maybe the fire's actually started farther back in the building, but as that smoke travels through the building, it can lose color, it can lose velocity. Again, as Dave Dotson would point out, those hydrocarbons will stick to the surfaces, to the walls, and it'll lose color as it travels. But it's still fairly pressurized. It could be a good working fire in there, and you want to make sure that you note that the air track is all leading to show that you do have a good working fire in this building based on the cubic footage. And then your building profile. We've talked about a couple different things as far as it's multi-story and it looks like it's big box in the back. But other things that are going to come into play on this is it sprinklered? That's going to be a component we're going to look at. How are you making access? And then looking at actually how this building is built. This building is actually kind of tricky. It's got some pre-33 masonry in the rear. It's been added on to. This is actually concrete block that they've actually put stucco over the top of or finish over the top of. So really knowing your area, knowing your businesses, and really going out and checking those out beforehand. But if not, get that good 360 and figure out what your building's made of construction-wise. The other component for the building is just the sheer size of this. And your pre-plans should reflect this. Your pre-plan should be talking about the size of the building and the square footage, even up to the point where it talks about fire flow. Looking at that length times width divided by 3 to determine your fire flow, or your cubic area divided by 100 multiplied by the fuel load factor. Whatever fuel model or fuel load factor you're dealing with and fire flow you're dealing with, start calculating that out on your pre-plans. Your pre-plan should also be more than just a big box drawn on there as far as the layout of the building, where the electrical is and the gas and where the entrances and exits are. But what does it look like inside? Is there a conveyor belt? Is there aisles? I want to make sure that if I'm actually utilizing that pre-plan to run my incident, and I personally will like to draw on my pre-plan. I'll take some markers, draw hose lines in where they're at, draw on the Alpha Bravo, show those sides where they're at on the pre-plan. I'll take that paper pre-plan right out of there. If you're using digital pre-plans, you're using tablet command, same type of thing. You can actually take that digital pre-plan, draw on there when you need to. But I'll draw on those pre-plans, and I want to know that if a firefighter says they're in a grocery store and they're trapped in aisle 14, I want to know where in the building that is, or even if it's on near the frozen peas. Something to that effect. Your pre-plan should be more than just a drawn box with exits and entrances there. Now let's break down the savers for this incident. And there's a couple different things we're going to look at. So again, your search profile is going to be a little bit more limited based on unless you have a known rescue. And the way that you're going to look at a known versus a probable rescue on this commercial structure is if the building is occupied, is there workers there, can they all vouch for, are all the workers out? And this may be tough if you have a large commercial building where there's a lot of occupants or even customers possibly. But that's where you're going to start getting to the known versus unknown rescue potential. If you are using search components on this building, now you're talking about large area search, possibly rope bag searches depending on what your department does, and then going from limited area fire attack and shortest distance you can for fire attack and search components because of the big size. Your attack, again on this, you should be setting up for attack with multiple lines at once. Based on what you believe you're going to need gallons per minute wise, don't get caught into just that single engine company pulling a attack line in, and maybe that's where you can start with, but make sure you're prepared to back up that fire attack. Get that additional line in there early as you can once you get RIC established. And we'll talk about more about RIC here in a little bit. Your ventilation profile, there's a couple different things. It looks like this is a fairly small portion that it comes out with that second floor, and it's probably going to be a flat roof here and a flat roof behind this mansard. Your truck company may be able to get up there and get you a good hole to alleviate your heat and your smoke from this corner very easily. With your extension and exposures, again, your exposure or your internal extension is actually going to be the main warehouse itself. Look for problems in there. Visualize through this door, do you actually have smoke or fire in the warehouse? And if you do, that's going to be a large component of your puzzle. Now, when we talked about RIC on these buildings, I personally would like to reinforce my RIC team. I don't want to just have a single engine company out there, depending on the organization you work for, get a heavy rescue, respond to the incident, and have a reinforced RIC. Heavy rescue with airbags and struts. concrete saws, something that they can actually use for cutting rebar or torches. If you have a RIC activation in this, you want to be proactive and not reactive. So get that heavy rescue, get on the road as early as possible. And then salvage. Even on this building here, even though they're not saving their own pieces of equipment or property, you can do a lot to help a business survive after the fire. Saving their files, saving product, doing some good salvage work. Get those salvage covers in there, get a lot of work done. So you can see based on just the SAVERS acronym that this fire is going to be pretty labor intensive, getting a lot of resources on scene. If you're running this fire right now where you actually have myself muted and you want to see what's going on, if you didn't start that second alarm early on, there's probably going to be a couple of issues, right?